All right, this is going on page 92 and we're done. So we're going to write the equations of the lines, which really we've already figured out how to find all of this stuff a couple of times. This was one of the first things that we did. We just didn't put it in an equation form. Remember, we're still not moving left or right, so we just have the A, B, and D in here, but I want you to put the parentheses around the BX. Okay? This is very repetitive, so hopefully we can not mess this stuff up. Our amplitude is our A. The period, can I just look at the equation and always just pull the period right as a number off of there? No. Okay, what is the period for the parent function for sine and cosine? 2 pi. Okay, so the period for the parent function is 2 pi. So I'm going to take 2 pi and I divide it by what? B, the absolute value of B, right? Because B I can get off the equation, that's the frequency. Remember, sometimes we have to actually calculate the frequency, and that is just 2 pi divided by the period. So always 2 pi divided by 1 gives you the other. Right? Vertical shift is still D, which makes your midline y equals D. So something we did right after we created our fettuccine graphs and before we started actually graphing was find all of this information. We just didn't put it in an equation form because we hadn't got that far to talk about that stuff yet. So let's look at what we've got here. So we got this graph. We should be able to pull this information off. I like to start with my midline. Sometimes I got to count. Sometimes it's pretty easily to write in. So I know that my midline is, bless you, y equals 1. What is my amplitude here? 1. You can get frequency and period off the graph most of the time, not always, but I think people are a little bit more comfortable with the period coming from the graph. And because we're not moving left or right yet, I can look at this and know, would I be writing this as a sine or a cosine function? Sine, okay? Because it starts here. Ooh, my goodness, no, that's not what I wanted. Okay, because I start here. It goes like this, right? There's my sine function, okay? And I can tell that one cycle goes to 4 pi. So the period is 2 pi. Frequency, which is the absolute value of B, that is 2 pi. Oh, I put 2 pi. The period is not 2 pi. What's the period? 4 pi. My goodness. Thank you. Sorry. I don't know where I was already thinking about what I was going to write up there, and I wasn't. It's 4 pi. Y'all are slow on the draw today. You correct me if I do something ridiculous. All right, so 4 pi, and then the absolute value of B is 2 pi divided by the period, which is 4 pi. That's why I knew I did something stupid, because I was like, I'm going to get 1, and I know it's not 1. What is my frequency? 1/2. And you can get that from the graph, too, because you can see you only have half of the cycle between 0 and 2 pi. But either way is fine, however you come up with that. All right, so then to write our function, we decided that this is sine. So I have f of x is equal to the amplitude, which is 1, so I don't have to write it, times the sine of b, which is 1/2, times x, and then plus 1. Okay. And notice notation-wise, this is 1/2 x. It's not x over 2. However, if this was a pi, it would be pi over 2 and not 1/2 pi, right? And it just kind of depends on how you use it, how you write it. We all good on that? All right, let's look at number 2. So I'm going to go for my midline first. I'm going from -6 to 2. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'd be right here. So my midline is at y equals -2. What is the amplitude? 4. Good. Is this sine or cosine? Cosine, because if I start there, it looks like this. Now remember, we could write it as a sine function with a shift, but we're not shifting it. All right, so I've got cosine. What is the period? Pi halves. We agree with that? Frequency is the absolute value of B. It's equal to 2 pi divided by the period. If the period is a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal, 2 over pi, so we get 4. You could also get that from the graph. You have 1, 2 cycles in pi units, which means you'd have 4 cycles in 2 pi units, and you'd be good to go. Okay? So we write the equation. F of x is equal to the amplitude, which is 4, times the cosine of the frequency, which is 4, times x, and then minus 2. What questions you got? We good? All right, so let's look at 3. Midline, pretty easy to figure out right here, right? Y equals 0. What's your amplitude? 1. Is this a sine or a cosine function? Sine. Here's 1 cycle of sine. That means the period is what? Pi. So what's the frequency? 2, because I do the absolute value of b is equal to 2 pi divided by the period, and that gives me 2. Okay. So you write the equation. We good? All right. Okay, so on this one, again, I'm going from -6 to 2. So that's 8 units. So I can go up 1, 2, 3, 4 to get my midline. So y equals -2, which means what's my amplitude? 4. Kind of get the 2 at the same time, right? Is this sine or cosine? Sine. Here's one cycle of sine. So what's the period? 2 pi. So what's the frequency? 1. So write the equation. Just x. Yeah, we didn't put the 1 in there. What questions you got? We good? Easy enough? All right, so now we have it in words, same type of thing, but we're not pulling it off of a graph. There are 4 transformations, A, B, C, and D. We don't have a C right now, so it's just A, B, and D, so I just have to make sure that I can identify those. So I have this is cosine, amplitude of 1/2, so that's A. Midline, y equals -4, so that's D. The period is 4 pi, but I need b, so the absolute value of b, 2 pi divided by the period, is going to give me 1/2. Once I have all that, I just put the pieces together like I did, so f of x is equal to a, which is 1/2, times the cosine of b, which is 1/2, times x, minus 4. We good? All right. On number 6, amplitude of 1, so that's A. Midline, y equals 3, that's D. Period of 2 pi, which means the absolute value of B is what? 1, because it would be 2 pi divided by 2 pi, and that gives you 1. My equation, f of x equals a, which is 1, so I'm not writing it. This is a sine function. Sine of b, which is 1, so I'm not writing it, x, and then plus 3. So it's just a vertical shift up. Okay. We all good with that? Let's look at 7. A equals, so this is sine. Amplitude is 3, that's A. Midline is 0, that's D. The period of pi thirds, so the absolute value of B is equal to 2 pi divided by pi thirds, so that's times 3 over pi, which is going to give me what? 6. Okay, so write that equation. Any questions? All right, I'm gonna give you a minute. I want you to do the last two. That's what I got on those. Let me know if you have questions or you're confused about where something came from. Are we good? Okay. Should be fairly simple.